Welcome. Wow, that time it worked, huh? Start of the church year. How about that? We're also halfway through. Rosh Hashanah is behind us. Yom Kippur is in front of us. So it's the new year, right? Which is celebratory. And then in the Jewish tradition, you've got, it's something about 8 days or so to start making amends with people. So I suggest you start. And then, like, the very serious, probably the most serious day in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, is right around the corner, and that's when kind of even God can forgive you of your sins. There's no deeper message other than to just honor the Jewish tradition, which we're not going to pick up and speak about too much today, but I, honor all our fellow Jewish friends and the great history of that religion that birthed Christianity and Islam and has been a staple of our Western traditions. Judeo-Christian traditions forever. So we stand on Tongva land here. This church was built on Tongva land. It was purchased long after that was going on for $30,000. This 6.5 acres of our land was thought to be unbuildable. Noel still threatens that the parking lot's going into the canyon tomorrow, so I think we have a chance to survive. We had our largest number of people at Laundry Love yesterday. The Kistners were down there. We ended up closing up shop by giving away, supporting the laundry of 20 people, which is pretty expensive if you've been to a laundromat. It's $400 or something like that. So we're grateful for the Kistners for all they do. There's still time to get in on this 11-part race discussion series, which have a little bubbling life to it on Wednesday. So that's a chance to sort of reconvene and continue this conversation and the growth that we've had for the last, year and a half or so. It's as if, the Pied Piper was arrived and it's past 10:30 and everyone's coming. I love it. It's great. It's Water Communion Sunday, and as if Amy Pham's husband gets his way, it will be known as Liquid Death Communion Sunday. He was marketing that water. No, it's a marketing campaign. Bear with me. He makes something called Liquid Death. I was trying to turn it into a joke. This coming Saturday, probably the more pressing news of all of them is we're going to have a planned giving workshop right here. We're going to have a little bit of finger food and stuff on the patio from 9:30 to 10. We're going to Zoom it. It's a chance to think about your wills, maybe putting PC in your will, but even not that or the UUA, but it's just a chance to start thinking about, are you planned for the sad, great, inevitable, and are you planned and it's really the most responsible moral choice you're going to make in your life as to how you distribute your assets if you have any at the end. So this is a good chance to think about it, and I'll tell you, in preparing for it, it's been very thoughtful for me, so I'm grateful for the opportunity. And that's coming up on Saturday. You can Zoom in on that, or you can come here and be present right here live. Tara's going to talk. I'm going to show some UUA experiences. I think Judy's Chaffers, I'm trying to talk her into talking. And we have a history, a legacy of that planning here, but we also have some new models for folks to look at. Okay. Any other announcements from the crowd? Anyone want to share something that's going on? We have a membership class coming up this coming Sunday. So if you're new, if anybody's new, Judy Carter's our chair, trying to give up that job, but we won't let her. And if anyone is new and wants to be a part of that class, or if somebody just wants to come and have a conversation about UU values, that's a chance to do that. So that's one of our first of 3 or 4 throughout the year that builds up our class. If you remember last spring, we had a class of about 13 or 14 new members here. So I light our chalice with the words from Annie Dillard, who says, "We are here to abet creation," abet being mean to aid, "and to witness to it. We are here to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house." Isn't that pretty? I love that statement. There is kind of a sort of philosophy UUs have embraced that we are the universe's effort to know itself, right? How cool is that? So I light our words. I light our chalice. Nice racism is headed our way in early October. We in the deeper discussion are beginning to read that. That's something you might want to get a hold of. I can order books for you if you want. And even before that, we're going to do 2 adult ed sessions last Saturday of September. So not this Saturday, but the following one. And then the 1st of October, we're going to do a thing on Zealot, which is an interesting book about sort of the historical Jesus from Reza Aslan, who's a nonfiction writer, not necessarily an established scholar, but a very good read, and been fascinated. I've listened to it through twice. And so we're going to talk through that. So if you need to get your sort of inner Christian scholar on, or like talking about Jesus, join us in present or on Zoom for that, more likely. Okay. Today's a Janus feast day, right? Faces both ways. We essentially welcome ourselves back together formally. It's the start of the church year. Sort of a little bit of a reunion, ideally, at Parnt, which is fun. We've got the choir back today. They'll be singing from outside, so yay to them and us. Yeah. It's also, we can't help reflect that we're one day from the 20th anniversary of 9/11. You probably haven't missed that on the news. It certainly remains ominous, maybe even a little superstitious and fitting that the day that tragedy lines up with the set of numbers that we most call in a time of emergency. That always sort of strikes me, right? It's the perfect date for a tragedy, if there's ever a perfect date for a tragedy. Almost to the hour, 2 days, 2 decades, and a day ago. And we're also going to gather in our water. So if you've brought water, that's great. If you haven't, we have water options for people. It's a chance to come in and sort of maybe say something about where you went in the summer, or a reflection about the church moving forward or your life moving forward. Okay. It's now time for a hymn, and Severin and Shayna are going to move our spirits and entertain us at the same time.
We're going to hymn it. Hymn it. Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, and wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
That helps the spirit arrive. I'd like to invite our kids down for our children's moment. Come on down. Don't be shy. Don't be slower than the way you leave. Come on down. I'm going to stay up here because I got some things to read. Here we go. No, you got company, Kim. You're not alone. Naomi won't join you, but, hey, they spend enough time together. There we go. All right. Here we go. This is a story called The Blind Man and the Hunter. It is a West African tale from a book called Tales of Wisdom and Wonder by Hugh Lipton, and Diana and Lisa are going to act out our parts because they're so shy. This is part of their coming out engagement. Therapy. That's right, it's therapy. There was a blind person who lived in a small village on the end of the forest, and he was counsel to many people. He was respected beyond his bounds. People would say, "Sir, what makes you so wise?" They called him blind man. They weren't very sensitive. His answer was,
"Because I see with my ears."
He sees with his ears. Eventually, the blind man's sister married a hunter, and then the man became his father-in-law, and the person wanted to go hunting with him. The hunter was a little bit reluctant to take into the woods deeply the question, the value of having a blind man on his hunt. The blind man kept asking to go, and eventually one Sunday the hunter said,
"Yes."
Hunter had his spears and walked by hand the sightless man into the jungle, and he suddenly, while they were halfway in the jungle, the blind man froze in his tracks and silenced the hunter with the statement,
"There is a lion."
"There is a lion." The hunter froze too, but the father-in-law reassured him.
"He's sleeping over to the right."
The lion right here. I stole it from Sylvia, so I didn't want to waste the moment. When they got to their traps, the hunter saw, wrong page, sorry. All right. He said, "How did you know there was a lion?"
"That's my lion. How did you know there was a lion?"
"Because I see,"
"Because I see with my ears."
"Because I see with my ears," the stupid pastor says. They proceeded forward quite a bit. The hunter was impressed until suddenly the blind man stopped in his tracks, whispering to the hunter,
"Quiet. There is an elephant up ahead."
Pausing for a second, again whispering, "We can go."
Again, "It is not likely we will startle her. She's bathing happily in a watering hole." Wow!
How cool is that? That's the elephant right here, also stolen from Sylvia. Okay. I believe the translation of wow is wow in Swahili. The hunter was again impressed with his companion. In a bit, the hunter felt that they had a good spot to stop and set traps for some birds. For the sake of fairness, the hunter assigned one trap specifically for each of them. They started after a long walk home, planned to coming back the next day to see what the trap snagged. And while they were walking back, the blind man made a detailed mental map of the walk they just made, a long walk. Eventually, they got home, they napped, and then when they turned around the next day, the father-in-law was able to lead the way, barely missing a turn. The hunter was even more impressed. They made it to the spot where the traps were, and the hunter saw that in his assigned trap was a small bird. Realizing that his father-in-law couldn't see or knew how to work the traps, he suggested the father sit down, and he went to retrieve the birds. When he returned, he claimed the lie that they came from the opposite tracks so that he got the better bird. As they traveled back, he believed he had conned his blind father-in-law, and the hunter began confidently asking probing questions, philosophical questions like,
"Why do you think that there is anger, hatred, and warfare in the world?"
and
"Because the world is filled with so many people like you who take what is not theirs."
He knew all along. To which the hunter swallowed his stupid pride, swapped the bird from their respective hands, and earnestly humiliated, apologized. That's an earnest apology. So they walked some more, and then the hunter said,
"Why do you think the world is also filled with so much kindness and love?"
To which the wise man said,
"Because the world is also filled with so many people who learn kindness from their mistakes."
The hunter was touched, and eventually they made it home, and from that day forward, kids, pay attention. From that day forward, anytime the hunter was asked why his father-in-law was so wise, he would say,
"Because he sees with his ears, but he hears
Yay! Robin liked it. Let's sing out our kids with our Singing Out Our Kids song. Take it away, Sev. Okay. It's now time for joys and concerns. I'm going to invite Leanne up to light our candles for us, as has been our pattern. In Mistakes and Miracles, one of the chapters leads in with, I can almost not say it because it's so sort of true and powerful. Marlon Lavenhar, who I know, I wouldn't call him a friend, I shared some in divinity school with. He's the minister of Tulsa All Souls, one of the two largest churches in the country, if not the largest. And at the time of 9/11, we also have the memory of Katrina. We have every year feels like an anniversary of new floods and fires. And it's a moment to be reminded of our own vulnerability, of course. So we're all losers of things. And Marlon said that we've always, as UUs, led with our principles and with our strength, right? We've led with these sort of bright minds and heroic people who've done noble things, and we walk in that footsteps, and that's sort of the best of us. And he had wondered whether we might be better off if we led with our own brokenheartedness. Melissa's nodding, remembering the same thing, and it just struck me. So this is a prayer, not to bring us down too much. It's a prayer called, This is a Place for Losers by John Coronado. In a culture that worships winners, I encourage you to fall into a still space. Some people say that church is a place for losers, and they're right. This is a place for losers, a place for people who have or will lose their hair, have or will lost some of their teeth, maybe lost their place, maybe lost their memories, savings, lost their jobs. It's a place for people who've lost their parents, lost the love of their life, and even lost their children. It's a place for people who have lost their way, lost their faith, and worst of all, lost all hope. This is a place for losers. Let's see who we are and how we are and how much we need and can help one another. On a day that we're both asked to think about 9/11 and start a new year, God bless each and every one of us. I'm glad we're here together. It's difficult to stand here on a day after the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and be original, given all the coverage most of us have seen over the last, I don't know, it seemed like it mostly started about 3 or 4 days ago. What should or could I say that would add any level of reflection to the saturated market of memories we've seen? Truth is, I don't think I have much to share. I started writing this with the feeling that that 2-decade mark, right, one day after 2 decades, and the significance of that date demanded a topic, certainly demanded a Sunday. That's how I began, quite simply that way. However, the other truth was, I couldn't help thinking that I hadn't really thought much about 9/11 until recently. And I suspect that that's true for you too. Is that true? Up to the last week, had you not been thinking about 9/11? Maybe it was just me. I hadn't been. We just pulled out of Afghanistan with only the promise that an end of the disappointment was to be had, really. We just killed the national assumption that the right of women to choose what they are going to do with their own body was a right, which feels surreal. And we're now way more afraid of domestic terrorism than was ever conceivable in 2001. Between us and that bright fall day in 2001, right here at home, we've had an economic crisis fueled by bad mortgages built on loose criteria and greed. We elected the first black president, our first female vice president, and the worst president in at least the last century, almost electing him again. Between us and that bright early fall day 20 years ago and a day, we've witnessed the continual emergence of new technologies that have transformed us culturally, socially, economically. Between now and then, while many of us have gotten richer, we as a culture have grown probably more polarized. At the deepening of our own internal divisions as a nation, we didn't need any help with that, and it was fueled by foreign voices. I'm not done. In only the last year and a half, we've experienced a global pandemic, watched the explosion of both racial unrest and racial awareness rise up, lost precious time undoing climate change, and stood mostly slack-jawed watching our own president and a quarter of Congress reject the results of an election, an attempt to coup the Capitol building. Who needs airplanes when you've got right-wing congressional reps popping the doors open of the Capitol building? Maybe we could use an external threat to give us a sense of national unity again. So I don't mean to be disrespectful of a topic I freely chose or dismissive of the lives lost. I'm about to not be very dismissive at all. I just felt like 9/11 was starting to feel like one of history's events when for a while it felt like the historical event. It still, I believe, ranks as the most important day in the new century. The planes crashing into those towers and all that followed for about the next 4 to 6 hours were one of those moments that stopped time. Only 3 or 4 times in an average lifetime does a collective event define a day on the calendar, right? 9/11 did that. Maybe more importantly, maybe only 3 or 4 times in a lifetime, does the mere mention of a date have you racing off to your own unique remembrances of what happened when a sequence of events unfold. It's a weird moment when we're all bound together by our own unique memories and the realization that there isn't history as much as histories. As I proceeded to immerse myself in 9/11 remembrances, what concerned me was the profound individuality in each event. Those who are from New York or there at the time have an almost often post-traumatic experience to it. Every one of us, I bet, could say where they were when they first heard that story, more or less. One of the great truths of postmodern life and consciousness And the way that race theory has kind of come in to re-understand us with history is that there is not such a thing as history as histories. So I wanted to just tell 4 or 5 stories. I'll start with mine. I do remember it being a bright, beautiful morning. I would never remember it had it not become 9/11. The beauty of that bright blue sky uneventfully standing in odd contrast to what would happen stuck with me. I had just gone for my first jog around a new neighborhood that frankly scared me a little. I had just about finished moving in and setting up for my first full-time parish internship in the very humanist, communist-leaning Third Unitarian Church, which was really a mostly white church in an impoverished neighborhood on the very west side of Chicago. Interestingly, this was the kind of neighborhood that experienced so much of what we've talked about over the last year and a half ago, from redlining to white flight to food deserts. When the news broke that the plane had struck one of the World Trade Center towers in New York City, I was doing sit-ups on this sturdy coffee table I had brought from Boston. I had done some of the things that ministers had done before. I'd preached sermons, I'd visited the sick, but in terms of the subtleties of having any level of sort of leadership in terms of making decisions over what would happen when a 9/11 happened was sort of a baptism for me. I would have naturally done nothing, it not being a date on the calendar. For someone who's pretty socially conscious, I can be a bit numb to the experiences public events have on people. I'm shocked by that sometimes. I almost always kind of get it wrong. We opened up the church that night for sharing, and it was a beautiful experience. For the 62-year-old decorated and retired U.S. Army Colonel Rick Roscola, 9/11 was a more immediately poignant day, and his last. Roscola, after retiring from the military, focused on providing security at the World Trade Center for the firm Morgan Stanley. He was often credited with a lot of forward thinking around security and safety in particular, and he held these 2 biannual evacuation drills for the 22 floors the firm occupied in the South Tower, made him very unpopular. They were rude, in fact. They had to walk the stairway all the way down. These, brokers and stockbrokers had to interrupt their day. Giving directions with a megaphone on 9/11 in one day and a cell phone in the other, he took news in and helped direct people down. He rejected the idea that they stay in place. They were in the tower that wasn't initially struck. His decision made all the difference. Very few of those 2,500 employees died that day. He was one of them. For a young Islamic girl named Clara in Missouri, 9/11 had a different impact. Clara's family had only 4 years earlier immigrated to America from Palestine. Shortly after 9/11, she had her hijab torn off. That was only one of 5 school systems that they would be in before they lost faith and moved back to the West Bank, where they could find some respite from hate. Gulp. John Walker will remember 9/11, 2001, because when the news struck in his childhood Washington, D.C. home, and it was announced that all government workers, his dad being one of them, were to stay home, John's dad urgently suggested that they go golfing. So for this ominous day with fighter pilots circling above their heads while they golfed, he found it an odd day. At the end, his dad announced that he had terminal cancer and would soon be too sick to go. He was right and was soon gone. On the days and weeks that followed 9/11, at a big house of my distant aunt, someone married into my family via my mother's sister, in Hull, Mass, shortly after 9/11, she began to get calls from the FBI and CIA. Calls about a Saudi man who had rented a room from them. I've been in this house many times. Had paid cash, dressed immaculately, and was almost never around. This reclusive, polite, but rare renter had private cable lines put into this large Catholic family home of theirs that they were trying to hold on to by renting out the space. She had raised her 5 kids there. He was the lead terrorist that boarded the famed Flight 11. There were all those unnamed people who jumped from the towers. That's the one that gets me. Those whose concerns were just an hour before likely as simple as whether they were going to be late or whether there was too much foam in their latte found themselves standing an eighth of a mile in the air on the edge of a burning building ripped open by a plane. With fire burning them from behind, these people saw their next best option as to jump. Whew. That just makes me crumble. One report said that only 4 people on any of the floors above the impact zone in the South Tower got out before the entire building collapsed. I cannot imagine that terror. Let's have a moment of silence for them, if not all. Just take a second. That is horrible. And there were those on the plane that had to be courageously wrestled to the ground in rural Pennsylvania to make sure that the plane was itself at that point aware that they were going to be probably used as a weapon. A friend of a friend of mine, where I worked at the National Interfaith Committee for Worker Justice, was one of the heroes that fought the terrorists off to regain control of the plane and drag it into the ground. That bright, beautiful fall day would turn out to be a day in which the U.S. would run out of yellow police tape. Bad things like that don't happen to 4,000 people like us in a day here in America anywhere without notice. Certainly bad things like that don't generally happen in our country at all, most of the Western world, most anywhere for that matter. It was a long time, as I'm sure you remember, after 9/11 before it was in any way appropriate to be in any way funny. It rocked us. We retaliated, of course, retaliated with a manhunt and a reinvasion of a country that, despite some unseemly behavior, when you added some marketing to it, we decided to invade with our own version of terrorist attacks, you might say. Other than they shared a basic religion with the terrorists, there was no particular reason to invade Iraq, as it turns out. As a mother of one of the 9/11 victims said with poignant sadness in her voice, the world doesn't stop for every death, and that is true. But because nearly all of us can remember how 2 decades and 1 day ago the world stopped and things slid off our daytimer real fast, she was at least wrong about her son's death. We do stop for those deaths every year, and I suspect we will do that for some time. However, one of the unique tasks here in this immensely pleasant but justice-seeking place in this congregation, we have to remember is that there's a kid in Afghanistan or Somalia or wherever, the list is long, who am I kidding? There are a million kids and adults, too, who are so regularly under assault, not necessarily from flying planes or even from drones, but they're just generally so deprived enough and out of the loop of modern Western concerns that grief for Americans that regularly fly in bright metal planes and live high in skyscrapers, to watch them get honored and compensated for their death with thousands of dollars must feel strange. Strange like the way a peasant in the Middle Ages must have felt at the sight of the news that the king just lost their head. And all those people lost in the world and unimportant, they get a 9/11 reference from me here too. I'm mostly thinking about people overseas, but back in my little urban oasis where this story began, I remember distinctly how few flags went up that day, how few yellow ribbons surrounded my neighborhood. I had to drive to the highway to see any impact of 9/11, really. Basically, I had to go to a mile from my house to the expressway. And when I was new and I was the only white person in the whole neighborhood. And I asked one of the young black kids that hung around the church, I said, "Why are there so few yellow ribbons in our neighborhood?" And he looked at me with some level of compassion. He said, "That wasn't my World Trade Towers." When skyscrapers fall on you, you don't stand a chance. When a plane flies into your building, you don't stand a chance. Let's never let our guard down on terrorists, both overseas or homegrown. However, we must also never forget that when you are part of a small nation that gets in the crosshairs of an angry empire in any generation, you don't stand a chance either. There was an expression that grew popular because of the dramatic events of 2 decades ago. You might remember it. You know why the world sometimes hates us? Because we don't know why the world hates us. And I don't think the world hates us, but it does question us sometimes. And we should also never forget that there are 2 ways to kill terrorism. The first one are with soldiers and guns, and we do need them, and I believe in that. The second is that broader justice kills terrorism too. A balance of forgiveness and understanding that the world can see kills terrorism too. Justice kills terrorism. Listening kills terrorism, and so does equality for that matter, never simply achieved for sure. Opportunities to step away from a world of hate and inequality kills terrorism too. Let's take a minute to resolve ourselves to not forgetting to be peaceful, and that peace is the path, and to remembering that the fastest way to peace is always via a broader justice, and we owe that truth to those a few seconds before any of us who wish to step up and pour our water and officially start the year. Amen. So, I want you to come up. Leanne's going to help me here. You can come up if you have water. If anybody has water, they can come up and pour it into our bowl. We usually use that for child dedications or any other sacred kind of moment. That's kind of how we build our sacred baptismal water, you might say. We also have water available here, so if anybody, did anybody bring water? Judy brought water, there you go. So why don't you start, Judy, and come up and share us, who you are and maybe something you did this summer and what your hopes are for the new year. We're good. Anyone else? I'm greedy for this to be the era when you look back and say that you knew what it was like to be a member of a tribe with an open heart. I want us to be a community that knows and nurtures your human and animal spirit together, a place that knows and teaches what is instinctively good, providing those experiences. I want us to be a place that does some good, that invites people and loves them for real and likes to gather. A place where the work feels real, essential, and simple. I want people to think they are a member of a tribe now. It would be now the time where you would be thinking about putting a donation into the passing offertory plate. The COVID, we don't pass the plates anymore. However, that's just because you don't have to touch a wicker basket does not mean that I'm going to buy your suggestion that the bird ate your donation. After our music, we're going to have a very brief description from those who are rehabbing raptors. They're going to come in, hopefully, and just give us a couple words about what we're going to see. And we're making a $200 donation to the Rehab Raptor Center of PV. So we're going to, I encourage you when you leave to go grab a seat, not now, but don't leave. Oh, the choir. Yeah, I was wondering why you were going. So new to this. Like, where are you going?
The strife, I hear its music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? While though the tempest loudly roars, I hear the truth it liveth, and though the darkness around me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing when tyrants tremble in their fear and hear their death knell ringing? When friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? In prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Hi, my name is Christina, and I am with South Bay Wildlife Rehab. I am the assistant director. We also have our director out here and a few of our volunteers. And if you'd like to join us, we're going to do a talk. We're going to tell you about each of the birds that we brought today, why we have them, how or where they live normally, what they eat, how they survive out there. We're going to tell you a little bit about what you can do to help wildlife. You might think that there's not a lot you can do, but there actually is. We'll take your questions and answer them. It doesn't have to be just on the birds that we brought here today. And Anne is going to do an introduction of who we are and how long we've been around, so I don't want to say too much before the talk out here, but please join us and see the beautiful birds, and hopefully you're going to enjoy it and learn a few things today. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Yeah. We have owls all around here, by the way, just so you know. Oh, I almost had another one. But you can hear them at night, they hoo. It's really beautiful. Okay. It's time for our closing words. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that we believe in that that binds us forever together, makes us one. In spite of time and death and the space between the stars, we pause in silent witness to that unity. May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. Wouldn't that be amazing if you could say that and it be true? May love's presence illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be. And now, after the birds thing, our service will truly begin.
When you walk through a storm, keep your chin up high, and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
Okay, let's enjoy the birds.